recording the second part of the procedure in Sharia courts in 3, 2, 1. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yaumiddin. Amma ba'd. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Greetings, future Sharia counselors at law. So this is the second part of the procedure in the Sharia courts. Our objective for today, next slide. All right, so our objective for today is that you will be able to explain jurisdiction. All right, so any question na manggagaling sa jurisdiction exam, able to have heard from those who said na medyo maging detalyado dito na topic for jurisdiction. So ito yung second part. So for this video, ito yung mga i-cover na jurisdiction. So we'll start with the aspects of jurisdiction that I am referring to jurisdiction. Ang ginagawa natin kasi na ginagawa natin na yung basic, yung fundamentals. So, nire-ready ko kayo. Don't worry, bakit wala pa tayo dun sa Ijra at Al-Mahakim? Kasi nililay down muna natin itong mga basic topics sa remedial law para kapag nag-jump na tayo sa Ijra'at, mas iintindihan nyo siya ng malalat. Also because ang ating rules court applies suppletorily. So that even in court practices, in Sharia District Court, in Sharia courts, ginagamit natin yung rules of court. Kasi very limited yung rules na meron tayo sa Ijra. So we're laying that basis, don't worry. Pagdating sa last part, when we will have survey of decisions of the Supreme Courts on Sharia courts, you will see kung paano sila ina-apply. Move to the classification jurisdiction. Lalo na, and at this point, I'll beg the indulgence as though jurist. Pwede nyo bilis isipin. Kasi kabisado, going to be elementary yung approach para dun sa ating mga ulama. Kasi ba mahihirapan na I was requested na nahihirapan sila dito na topic. So susubukan ko sa kaya ko na i-explain na maintindihan nila yung topic ng jurisdiction at bakit ito mahalaga. So we'll have the original versus appellate jurisdiction, exclusive versus concurrent, and then we'll also tackle territorial jurisdiction. Yung geographical jurisdiction ng Sharia courts in the Philippines, SDC, SCCs, we have already covered that one in the video 1, part 1. You can check that one. Nakalagay doon yung geographical jurisdiction of the courts with the present law na we have increasing the number of Sharia judicial district. After which, what's the effect? Bakit kailangan natin na pag-aralan yung jurisdiction? Ano pala mangyayari if the court has no jurisdiction? And then we'll go, since tapos na tayo sa territorial jurisdiction ng Sharia courts, we'll go to the jurisdiction, the subject matter jurisdiction of the Sharia courts in the Philippines. After that, we'll discuss inherent powers and means to carry jurisdiction of the court. So merong jurisdiction ng court. Ano yung inherent powers of the court? And then paano niya i-enforce yung kanyang jurisdiction? We also discuss doctrine of adherence to jurisdiction and residual jurisdiction. Kapag wala ng jurisdiction yung court, kasi nakapag-decide na siya, for example, meron pa ba siyang mga pwedeng gawin or wala na? Because kapag wala ka ng jurisdiction, wala ka nang pwedeng gawin. We'll have also, and we'll discuss primary jurisdiction and the doctrine of exhaustion of administrative remedies. And then we'll compare yung sinasabi na error of jurisdiction versus error of judgment. And ano yung effect if it's only an error of jurisdiction? And what if it's error of judgment? Finally, we'll discuss the difference between, we'll compare and contrast jurisdiction and venue. And venue in personal and real actions. All right. In the next slide, we'll have the what's jurisdiction. So itong jurisdiction, ito yung kapangyarihan, yung power or authority ng court to hear, try, and decide a case. Yun yung trabaho ng court. Makinig, pakinggan yung magkabilang party, sa muda-i at saka muda-alay. Okay. So, and then, i-decide yung kaso based doon sa ebidensya na natanggap ng korte. So, para magawa yun ng court, meron siyang karapatan at yun yung tinatawag natin na jurisdiction. And kasama sa jurisdiction, syempre, ayaw natin na mananalo ka lang sa papel. Okay, may decision ng court, pero sa papel lang. Kasama na rin sa jurisdiction yung power ng korte to execute the decision. We move on to the aspects of jurisdiction. Isa-isahin natin ang jurisdiction. Simulan natin sa jurisdiction over the subject matter or yung subject matter jurisdiction. Ito yung power ng court to hear and determine the general class to which the proceedings in question belong. Jurisdiction, yung subject matter jurisdiction, is conferred by law based on the facts alleged in the complaint, since the latter comprises a concise statement of the ultimate facts constituting the plaintiff cause of. So itong subject matter jurisdiction, ito yung for example, may cases like for example, custody sa Shari'ah court. So parties silang okay, so na hindi nagdo, nagkahiwalay. Tapos their jurisdiction kasi meron na, it's conferred by law because under sa BOL, yung Bangsamoro Organic Law, nakalagay na, dinefine na doon, in-enumerate na niya yung mga kaso na merong jurisdiction si Shari'ah Circuit Court at saka si Shari'ah District Court. So, a matter of looking at the law. So, titingnan mo yung batas. Kapag wala doon sa mga naka-enumerate, and we will go into that, the details of the jurisdiction na nakalagay sa batas na merong jurisdiction si Shari'ah Circuit Court at saka si Shari'ah District Court. Alright? Kapag wala doon, yun yung subject matter. Yun lang yung mga pwede nilang i-handle. Okay? Na kaso. Na meron silang karapatan na pakinggan. Alright. In the next slide, okay. So, how is jurisdiction over the subject matter acquired? And we said, the court acquires jurisdiction over the subject matter through kung nakalagay sa Constitution na merong karapatan ng korte or kung wala. So, yung Constitution kasi sa Supreme Court, naka-enumerate doon yung jurisdiction ng Supreme Court. For the rest of the courts sa ating bansa, we have laws. So, yun yung titingnan natin. That's how you acquire jurisdiction. Like for example, ang basic na example, sa criminal law, generally, paano mo malaman kung yung kaso na yan na kriminal, ang may jurisdiction is first level, city court, for example, MTC, o nasa regional trial court, nasa RTC. So tinitingnan doon yung imprisonment, yung magkano yung period na nakalagay. Kasi ang first level courts natin, for example, meron lang sila hanggang 6 years. If the penalty is up to 6 years, so parang pwede mong sabihin, but this is a general rule because we have specific cases na kahit mababa sa 6 years, pero ang may jurisdiction is RTC, like libel. But yung general rule lang yung aralin natin. Okay? So, Pagdating sa subject matter, ang meron lang authority si RTC kapag ang penalty is mas mataas sa 6 years. So from 6 years and 1 day hanggang reclusion perpetua. Yung lifetime imprisonment. Yun yung kapangyarihan ng regional trial court. So, hindi yung jurisdiction, yung kapangyarihan ng court, it is not acquired through administrative issuances or court orders. So, ng court magdi-declare, no, I am taking cognizance of this case. Hindi ganon. Like for example, may away na ejectment, forcible entry. Meron ka for example, bahay. Tapos nasa bakasyon ka, pagbalik mo may tao na nakatira. Tapos i-eject mo sila. Under the law, ang may jurisdiction yun is first level court. Nakalagay kahit gaano pa kalaki yung property mo, kahit yung assessed value na nasa milyon, tapos sasabihin mo, malaki yung property ko, pupunta ako ng regional trial court, doon ko ipa-file yung kaso. No, because the law says that for ejectment cases, ang exclusive original jurisdiction meron ang first level na courts. Yung subject matter na yan, sa kanila lang. Okay? Tapos hindi rin pwede ng pag-usapan ng mga parties, minibulog or na-file na. So sige lang, hindi namin i-question yung jurisdiction ng court. Ituloy lang ng korte. Okay? Tatahimik kami, silence, waiver. No, no, no. You cannot. Why? Because later, explain natin ano yung effect kapag ganon na nag-usap na sige, kaibigan natin yung judge, for example, sa Bonggao, Tawi-Tawi, doon na lang natin i-file yung kaso kasi we trust sa kanyang credibility, sa kanyang competence, mag-agree sila ng ganon. Alright? Hindi pwede yung ganon. So anong effect? We will learn that one later. In the next slide, now, how do you determine ngayon yung jurisdiction? Now, jurisdiction is a matter of substantive law. Substantive because nasa, sabi natin, PD 1629. Now, it is conferred by law. So, ang author is the Congress of the Philippines. This jurisdiction, which is a matter of substantive law, should be construed to refer only to jurisdiction over the subject matter. Jurisdiction over the parties, the issues, and the rest are matters of procedure. So, clear dito na yung subject matter jurisdiction, yun yung substantive law. Okay, again, bakit substantive law? Kasi paano mo malalaman yung class na yan, yung kaso na yan, ang may jurisdiction is Shari'ah District Court. Yung kaso na yan, Shari'ah Circuit Court, nakalagay sa batas. Nakalagay sa PD 1083 or nakalagay sa BOL. Na ang gumawa, it's the Congress. Kaya substantive law. Pero yung ibang aspects of jurisdiction, katulad ng whether or not the court, okay, so meron jurisdiction yung court dun sa kaso. Like, balikan ko yung ejectment, for example. Sa first level court, meron silang jurisdiction. So may authority na yung court. Pero meron ba siyang, naka-acquire ba siya ng jurisdiction over the person of the defendant? Muda alay, kasi dalawa always ang parties in a case. So, complainant or yung plaintiff, ang kalaban niya, yung defendant. Okay. So, ang korte kailangan maka-acquire ng jurisdiction over the person, hindi lang kay plaintiff, kailangan niya rin may jurisdiction or may authority siya sa defendant. Okay? Pero yung jurisdiction over the person of the parties, the issues as well as the rest, yung property na involved, yung rest basically, ang ibig sabihin ng rest is yung property subject of the litigation. These are matter of procedure. Kaya parang mixed yung jurisdiction. Yung subject matter, that's a substantive law. All the rest aspects of jurisdiction is procedural law. Now, the test of jurisdiction is whether the court has the power to enter into the inquiry and not whether the decision is right or wrong. So yun yung ano doon, yung meron ba kahit gaano pa katama, for example, nag-agree sila tapos doon nila final yung kaso sa Bonggao Tawi-Tawi kasi they trust the judge there. But even hindi kasi issue kung naging tama ba yung decision ni judge o mali. Kahit gaano pa yan katama kasi mas magaling pa siya sa justices ng Supreme Court. Pero kasi yung jurisdiction, yung pagsisimulan doon, kung mali, mali. Pag wala siyang jurisdiction, um, everything na ginawa niya would be considered void. Alright? So in the next slide, okay, so example ng jurisdiction over subject matter. Like sa SDC, yung sabi ko kanina na custody, kapag ang issue is custody, nakalagay na yan sa PD 1083 at nakalagay na rin sa BOL na yung custody, ang may jurisdiction yan is the Shari'ah District Court. Okay? So, any decision by a court without a law vesting jurisdiction upon such court is void. Okay? Pagdating naman sa any dispute, ang parties parehong Muslim. Tapos any dispute in relation to marriages, hindi mo pwedeng i-file yan sa SDC. Kailangan dadaan ka ng Sharia Circuit Court. Okay? Why? Because the law says so. Jurisdiction over subject matter is conferred by law. Now, jurisdiction over the subject matter. In the next slide, saan makikita? Kasi sabi mo, Judge, conferred by law. So, sa PD 1083, kung gagamitin natin yung PD 1083, yung jurisdiction ng Sharia District Court nakalagay sa Article 143 at saka 144. Yung, I believe yung 143 is yung kanilang original jurisdiction and then yung 144 is yung kanilang appellate jurisdiction. So nakalagay doon yung jurisdiction ng SDC. Yung Sharia Circuit Court naman, nakalagay yan siya. Saan mo makikita? Sa batas, sa 155. Huwag niyong hahanapin kung may jurisdiction ang court sa ijraat. Kasi wala kang makikita sa ijraat. Ang makikita mo sa ijraat is how are you going to enforce the rights. Okay? So in the next slide, here, what determines the nature of an action? Okay, kasi minsan critical, and we will discuss this, I believe, in the third part of the presentation, sa third video, yung mga different actions like real action ba yan or personal action? Okay, action in personam ba yan or action in rem ba yan? Okay, paano mo malalaman? Makikita mo yan sa allegations ng complaint. Through the allegations of the complaint. Kasi pag mayroon kang complaint, okay, doon nakalagay yung lahat ng allegation mo, yung mga facts. Bakit mo sinasabi? Kasi bago ka gagawa ng complaint, dapat meron kang right. Saan mo makikita again yung right? Sa substantive law. So dapat sinasabi sa PD 1083 na meron kang karapatan. Okay. Tapos ngayon, yung karapatan mo na yan, encroach, na violate. Okay. So kaya magfa-file ka ngayon ng kaso. So ilalagay mo dun sa complaint mo yung mga allegations mo. Okay. Tapos yun yung magiging makikita ng judge. Okay, dun sa allegation mo, ano yung nilagay mo doon? So, meron siyang karapatan dun sa custody. Like for example, a mother, tapos hinahabol mo na ikaw ang may custody sa anak mo below 7 years old, for example. So dun sa allegations, pag nabasa ng judge, okay, so this is a custody case. So kung sa Sharia District Court mo yan final, so says, okay, meron akong jurisdiction. Kapag doon mo final sa Sharia Circuit Court, pag nakita niya yon, then dapat ang gagawin niya, i-dismiss niya yung kaso mo kasi wala siyang jurisdiction over the subject matter. And depende rin sa relief kasi ito yung dulo ng iyong complaint, yung relief, yan yung prayer. Kung ano yung hinihingi mo sa korte, anong hihingin mo na gawin ng korte. After mo maikwento yung allegations mo, ikukwento mo doon na under a particular law, meron kang rights. Tapos, kung ano yung, under that right, ano yung gusto mong gawin ng court? Ano yung hihingin mo? In the next slide, relief is the redress, the protection, the award or coercive measure which the mudai or the plaintiff prays the court to render in his favor as consequence of the delict committed by the defendant. Okay. Now, kapag na-file yung kaso sa amin sa korte, when the case, pagka-receive namin ng complaint, ano ang ginagawa ng court? In the next slide, ang tinatanong namin sa sarili namin, yes. Next slide, Mark. Okay, here. What is the subject matter of the complaint? Kasi i-check kung meron kaming jurisdiction o wala. And then, meron ba kaming jurisdiction over this subject matter? And again, saan namin titingnan kung meron kami, pagdating sa subject matter, nasa batas. Naka-delineate na yan. Draw na yan. Nakalagay na. Eto, Shari'ah District Court. Eto, Shari'ah Circuit Court. Alam yung mga kaso na pwede niyong i-hit. Okay, so answering these questions inevitably requires looking into the applicable laws conferring jurisdiction. Okay, finally, before we leave jurisdiction over the subject matter, what if meron kang objection? Ikaw, so may nag-file ng complaint against you, final niya ito sa court, and you feel na mali yung jurisdiction, what are you going to do? Next slide. So objection to jurisdiction over the subject matter may be raised at any stage of the proceedings, even for the first time on appeal. Ganon ka-importante na dapat ang korte kung saan mo final yung complaint, merong jurisdiction over the case. Kasi kahit sa appeal, ibig sabihin ng nasa appeal na is kahit dinicide na ni Shari'ah Circuit Court, nag-take cognizance, hindi napansin ni judge na wala pala siyang jurisdiction, tinuloy niya yung hearing, dinicide niya. Pagdating sa in-appeal niya, on appeal, saka pa niya na-realize na wala palang jurisdiction si Shari'ah Circuit Court, pwede niya i-raise yung kanyang objection ng subject matter, lack of subject matter jurisdiction. And kasi walang magagawa ang court kung hindi i-dismiss yung kaso. When the court dismisses the complaint for lack of jurisdiction over the subject matter, it is common reason that the court cannot remand the case to another court with the proper jurisdiction. It's only power. Ibig sabihin, kapag walang jurisdiction ng court, ang pwede lang niyang gawin dun sa kaso is to dismiss the case. Wala nang iba. Like for example, it happened to me for example, ngayon sa RTC. So, may na-file na kaso, for example, tapos wala akong subject matter jurisdiction. Like for example, mababa lang pala, hindi napansin yung katulad ng yung sa illegal gambling, yung mga kaso ng illegal gambling, yun yung gamitin natin na example. Meron lang kaming jurisdiction kapag yung akusado is collector. Pero kung debtor lang siya, yung pumusta lang, walang jurisdiction ng regional trial court. So minsan may na-file na debtor. So wala akong jurisdiction kasi ang debtor, mababa ang penalty sa first level. Dapat sa municipal trial court final. Ang assumption natin final sa akin, pwede ko bang gawin na hindi ko i-dismiss kasi alam ko naman na sa municipal trial court, i-remand. Ibig sabihin, ibababa ko doon. So sasabihin ko dun sa decision, sa order, na wala akong jurisdiction, nire-remand ko ito sa first level court, ikaw ang mag-hearing nito. Based on our jurisprudence, hindi ko rin yun pwedeng gawin. Why? Because ang pwede ko lang gawin kung wala akong jurisdiction is to dismiss the case. Hindi doon kasama na i-remand ko siya sa first level court. Okay? So that is jurisdiction over the subject matter. Okay? So let's move on to jurisdiction over the parties. So, kapag meron ng jurisdiction, so walang problema sa subject matter again kasi makikita natin yan sa batas. Malalaman mo kung may jurisdiction si court o wala. So punta tayo sa jurisdiction over the parties kasi this is one of the aspects of jurisdiction na dapat meron din jurisdiction ng court sa parties or what we call personal jurisdiction. Personal jurisdiction is the power of the court to bind a party to its processes and decisions. Okay? Kasi kapag walang karapatan, ang korte, paano kung meron siyang decision, tapos yung decision, may pinapagawa ka kay may pinapagawa ka kay defendant, or may pinapagawa ka, for example, kay plaintiff. Kung wala kang jurisdiction sa kanya, hindi mo siya pwedeng may i-order ka sa kanya. Okay? So the manner by which the court acquires jurisdiction over the parties depends on whether the party is the plaintiff or defendant. So magkaiba ang pagkaka-acquire, yung pagkakaroon ng jurisdiction ng korte over the person ni plaintiff at saka ni defendant. Isa-isahin natin. Simulan natin kay plaintiff. Paano mo nakaka-acquire si judge ng jurisdiction or ang korte over the person ni plaintiff? Okay. Si plaintiff, pag narinig niyo yung plaintiff, yung mga hindi law students dyan, yan same sa complainant. Pero sa korte, tinatawag natin plaintiff. Sa Shari'ah, we call them mudai. Okay? So yung complainant, Paano nakaka-acquire ang court? Dalawa. Number one is the moment na pumunta sa court at final na yung kanyang complaint. Ngayon, ano na ngayon na? Electronic or digital yung pag-file ng cases. So, pag-file mo ng kaso na mo, okay? So, one, complied mo na. Pero meron pang isa, bago naka-acquire ng jurisdiction over your person, is yung payment ng docket fee. Meron kasing filing fee na nare-require. Pag na-comply mo yon, then the court already has acquired jurisdiction over the person of the plaintiff. Okay? So, pwede nang umusad ang kaso. Pwede nang mag-move kasi nakapag-acquire na meron ng jurisdiction ng court over the subject matter ng kaso, tapos na meron na siyang jurisdiction over the person ni plaintiff. Kailangan mag-move. So, that's how the court acquired jurisdiction over the person of the plaintiff upon the filing of the complaint and payment of the docket fee. So, anong gagawin ng court after meron ng jurisdiction over the person ni plaintiff? Para umusad, kailangan niya maka-acquire ng jurisdiction over the person ni defendant. Paano? In the next slide, this is how the court. So, the court acquired jurisdiction over the person ni defendant or respondent. Let me be clear here para hindi kayo malito. Kapag yung action, advanced i-discuss din natin dito sa video 3. But for this purpose, para hindi ka malito, yung plaintiff at saka defendant, ginagamit natin yan sa civil cases, yung mga action, civil action. Action, cases, synonymous. Pag narinig nyo yun, pareho lang yan. Civil case, civil action. Yan. So, ang ginagamit natin, plaintiff at saka defendant. Doon sa mga proceedings or yung special proceedings, like yung petition for change of name, petition for correction of entries, ang tawag doon pag ikaw ang nag-file, petitioner. Tapos kung may respondent, yung kabila, it's respondent. Okay? So, ganun siya pinapangalanan sa complaint or sa petition. Sa civil action, madalas ang title, complaint. Kapag sa special proceedings, petition. Okay. Balikan ko yung jurisdiction over the defendant. So, naka-acquire na ng court ng jurisdiction over the subject matter kasi makikita sa batas, may jurisdiction si court. So, nag-file ng complaint, okay, nagbayad. Ang next is, ang gagawin ng court, if hindi dismissible yung complaint, is mag-i-issue ngayon ng summons. Ida-direct ng judge yung kanyang branch clerk of court na mag-issue ng summons. Okay. So, yung summons is-serve ng process server or ng sheriff doon sa defendant. Kung sino yung nakapalangan din. So, dapat ma-serve niya yun. Kapag nagkaroon ng service, ibig sabihin na-receive. Okay? Kasi due process. Kapag may kaso against you, our Constitution says dapat due process bibigyan ng pagkakataon yung defendant, yung other party. Paano niya ano yung exact word? Paano niya masasagot? Paano niya may panindag yung sarili niya if hindi niya nalaman na meron palang complaint. Nalalaman yun through summons. Kasi yung summons, dinidirect yung summons niya nang nakasulat dyan, sinasabi ng korte na merong nagre-reklamo sa'yo, merong kopya ng complaint. Binibigyan ka ng time, 30 days, para sagutin itong complaint. Okay? Hindi ka pwede mag-file ng motion to dismiss. Pero kung merong kang dahilan para i-dismiss namin itong kaso, isulat mo yan siya sa answer mo. Yun yung nakalagay doon. So, attach doon yung complaint. Okay, so, alam mo na ngayon na merong final na kaso, civil action against you. Okay. So, that's the time na ang korte meron ng jurisdiction over the person ni defendant. That's how the court acquires jurisdiction over the person of the defendant. Okay, judge, what if hindi pa siya naka-receive ng summons or kasi nahirapan i-receive yung summons pero narinig niya sa ibang tao tapos bigla pumunta siya sa court, nag-file siya ng meron siyang final sa court na motion or sumulat siya sa korte. Okay? That's as if also the court has the court through the voluntary submission or appearance of the defendant, now the court has acquired jurisdiction over the person of the respondent. Okay? So that's how the court acquires jurisdiction over the person of the respondent. So we have here some notes on jurisdiction over the defendant dahil maraming kaso na nadi-dismiss even pagdating sa umaabot na sa Supreme Court. Tapos saka pa nalaman na saka pa lumabas na yung pag-serve ng summons was improper and not valid. Kailangan yung pag-serve ng summons, yung pagkaka-receive is proper. Okay? In the third video, I will explain paano i-serve yung summons. But basically, ang requirement is personal service. As much as possible, personal na i-serve doon sa defendant. Okay. Merong tinatawag na substituted service, but we'll discuss that in the third video in case hindi mo ma-serve. Okay. First note, a party who makes a special appearance in court challenging the jurisdiction of the said court on the ground of invalid service of summons is not deemed to have submitted himself on the jurisdiction of the court. Okay, sabi ko kasi kanina, hindi na i-serve yung summons. Pero, nag-file ng motion sa korte. Sabi ko kanina, considered na naka-acquire ng jurisdiction ng court. Naka-acquire ang court ng jurisdiction over the person of the defendant. Pero Judge, what if pala yung final na ng motion is kino-question niya, sinasabi niya na hindi ako naka-receive ng summons. Sa kapitbahay pina-receive. Okay? Invalid yon, bawal yon. Kung hindi na pa-receive sa kanya in person, na nandyan pala siya. Okay. Kung kino-question niya yung validity ng pagkakaserve sa kanya ng summons at pagkaka-acquire, yung motion niya yan, huwag mong i-consider na naka-acquire ng jurisdiction yung court. Okay? So hindi siya voluntary appearance or voluntary submission to the jurisdiction of court. So ang gagawin di may information na pala ngayon na na nandyan siya, so isi-serve yung kasi what happened there is invalid yung service of summons. Okay, kaya kinwestiyon niya. Next note, the filing of a motion for time is considered a submission to the jurisdiction of court. Ibig sabihin, nag-file ka ng motion. So may issue doon sa hindi na-serve properly sa yung summons. Pero nagpunta ka sa court at nag-file ka ng extension of time, for example. That's already submission to the jurisdiction of the court. Next slide, the third one. Para mas madiin at maintindihan nyo pa, jurisdiction over the person of the defendant is required only in an action in personam. It is not a prerequisite in an action in rem and quasi in rem. Kailangan lang ito doon sa may mga defendant. Like for example, yung kaso nyo, yung action in personam, ang example niyan is yung collection of sum of money. May sinisingil. So si defendant, kailangan talaga maka-receive ng summons yan. Tapos, para ang court nakapag-acquire ng over the jurisdiction of the defendant. For cases na action in rem, ano ba ang pwedeng example ng action in rem? Like yung sa mga guardianship, petition for guardianship, okay? So, hindi na against the whole world yung mga, that's the phrase na ginagamit ng jurisprudence, hindi kailangan kasi wala namang doon walang defendant. So ano pa ba ang like yung mga petition for, like for example, petition for change of name. Okay? So ang respondent mo sa petition for change of name, for example, is yung civil registrar. Sa atin is, for example, Shari'ah District Court or Shari'ah Circuit Court. Pero in regular courts kasi, kung saan naka-register yung birth certificate, doon fina-file. So, walang walang defendant. In the first place, it's a special proceeding. So sinabi ko sa inyo kanina na it's respondent. So ang respondent mo dyan, ang tawag dyan sa kanila, public respondent or nominal party na nilalagay lang sila as a respondent because naka-register sa kanila. Tapos, dun sa relief, di ba, merong complaint. Nakalagay dun sa complaint na change of name So, uutusan mo na papalit or change of correction of entry in a birth certificate. Uutusan mo yung civil registrar na palitan or i-correct yung entry doon sa birth certificate ng tao. So kaya kailangan yung civil registrar maging respondent at makatanggap ng notice doon sa petition kasi hindi pwede na inutusan ng korte pero hindi pala siya kahit notice hindi siya nabigyan. Okay? So, in an action in personam, jurisdiction over the person is necessary for the court to validly try and decide the case. While in a proceeding in rem or quasi in rem, jurisdiction over the person of the defendant is not a prerequisite to confer jurisdiction on the court, provided that the court has jurisdiction over the rest. Okay, so that's how. So, jurisdiction over the person, to recap lang, over the person of the plaintiff or petitioner, over the person of the defendant. Kailangan ang court maka-acquire ng jurisdiction over those and then para magtuloy-tuloy yung kaso. Next, jurisdiction over the issues. Ang jurisdiction naman over the issues, it is the power of the court to try and decide issues raised in the pleadings of the parties. Hindi, so an issue is a disputed point or question to which parties to an action have narrowed down their several allegations and upon which they are desirous of obtaining a decision. So example, yung sinabi ko kanina na kaso like collection of sum of money. So ang issue doon is meron bang obligation yung defendant para bayaran yung A? Okay? Next na issue, okay, kung may obligation siya, kasi totoong may utang siya, may natitira pa ba na babayaran siya? Nabayaran ba niya o hindi? Okay, so these are the issues or kung ano yung disputed point. Okay, so paano nakaka-acquire? Kasi ang pwede lang i-rule na court na issue is yung issue na ni-raise ng mga parties dun sa kanilang pleading. Kung hindi ni-raise ni plaintiff, ang nagdi-dictate niyan is the plaintiff, hindi pwede mag-ano si judge or hindi siya pwedeng, hindi siya, kasi based on evidence, based on the allegations in the pleading. Sa Supreme Court nga, ang tawag natin dyan, obiter. Kapag yung hindi naman issue dun sa kaso, pero nagbigay na kanyang opinion or pinasadahan ng Supreme Court, we call that one obiter. But also in court, hindi pwede. Dapat kung ano lang yung issues raised in the pleadings ng mga parties, yun yung i-resolve din ng court. Okay? Now, if there's no disputed point by the parties, there is no issue. So, ano yan siya? Pwedeng judgment on the pleadings na yan ang gagawin. Hindi na kailangan na mag-hearing, if ever. Okay, now, how is jurisdiction over the issues acquired? In the next slide, generally, nasa pleading, yung initiatory pleading or yung complaint by the plaintiff, hindi ng answer. So, ang issue mo, ang tinitingnan ng court muna is yung ano yung sa pleading, initiatory pleading, which is actually the complaint. The pleadings present the issues to be tried and determine whether or not the issues are of fact or of law. Next, jurisdiction over the issues can also be acquired by stipulation of the parties as when in the pre-trial, the parties enter into a stipulation of fact and documents or enter into agreement simplifying the issues of the case, or finally by waiver or failure to object to a presentation. So, during the course of the trial, nag-present ng evidence yung kabila, pero hindi pala yun ni-raise ni pleading, pero hindi ka naman nag-object na present naman yung abogado mo, pinayagan niya doon, so waiver. So, naging issue na rin yun. And the court can already resolve on that one. Kasi hindi naman ang court ang nag-brought up ng issue. It was brought up during trial, pero yung kabila na party, hindi naman niya in-object. That's how we acquire jurisdiction over the issues. Moving on, para makarami, jurisdiction over the rest. This is the over the rest, again, is the property in litigation. It's the power of the court to try a case which would bind real or personal property or determine the status of a party. So, papaano ang court pwede niyang galawin or pwede siya mag-order involving a particular property in litigation? How the court acquires jurisdiction in the next slide is by placing the property in what we call custodial lehis. Okay, you place the property or thing under the custody of court. And example nito yung attachment of property. Attachment is a provisional remedy. Inshallah, I'll explain the detail of what is a provisional remedy. Provisional remedy is something that you can avail of para i-protect mo yung, i-preserve mo. Kasi for example, sa collection of sum of money, sinisingil mo yung yung defendant. Tapos, nalaman mo na yung mga properties niya, unti-unti na niyang binibenta. Baka manalo ka dun sa kaso, pero by the time na may decision yung kaso mo, wala na siyang ipambabayad sa'yo. So pag-file ng kaso, pwede ka na maghingi ng attachment. Which means, yung writ of attachment is directing the sheriff to the court na kunin, meantime, yung property ng defendant para hindi niya ma-dispose. And that's how you put property in custodia lehis. And the second one is that statutory authority conferring upon the court the power to deal with the property or thing within the court's territorial jurisdiction. Example nito, suits involving the property in the Philippines of non-resident defendants. So the only way that it will proceed and for the court to acquire jurisdiction over the property, okay, specific, there are laws involving this one. Okay, here, classification of jurisdiction, nauna na si Mark sa akin. Okay, sige, very well. Okay, next is original versus appellate. Quickly, yung original jurisdiction, ito yung power of the court to take cognizance of a cases instituted for judicial action for the first time. Yung original, hindi siya, para maintindihan mo dyan is yung appeal. Yung original is like, for example, yung complaint for custody. Okay. Sino ang court ko iuuna? Iuuna ko ba muna kay Shari'ah Circuit Court? Hindi. Kasi ang sabi ng batas, ang may jurisdiction, SDC. So doon may file sa SDC. When you file it to the SDC, the Shari'ah District Court exercises its jurisdiction. Okay? Original jurisdiction yung ginawa niya. Okay? Appellate jurisdiction is yung inapila. For example, ang case is it's a dispute between parties in relation to their marriage or anything disputes in relation to marriage or to divorce. So ang may jurisdiction niyan is the Shari'ah Circuit Court. So if a file mo sa Shari'ah Circuit Court, when you file it in Shari'ah Circuit Court, that is called original jurisdiction. Kasi ang may original jurisdiction is the Shari'ah Circuit Court. Okay? Tapos, pag in-elevate mo, may decision ng Shari'ah Circuit Court at hindi ka satisfied, i-a-appeal mo ngayon sa Shari'ah District Court yung decision. When you appeal it to the Shari'ah District Court, yung Shari'ah District Court, in exercise of its appellate jurisdiction yung gagawin niya, pag-take cognizance ng kaso. Okay? So that's the difference between original and appellate jurisdiction. Next. Exclusive, punta na tayo sa exclusive at saka concurrent. Yung exclusive naman, ito yung power ng court to exclude all others. So siya lang yung may jurisdiction over that one. Ito yung mga cases na nasa Article 143 ng PD 1083. Like for example, yung custody. Pag both parties are Muslims, exclusive jurisdiction yun. Sa Shari'ah Circuit Court naman, for example niyan, is yung disputes in relation to marriage or yung talak. Hindi pwedeng sa Shari'ah District Court kasi walang subject matter. Tapos sa Shari'ah Circuit mo lang yan. Tapos exclusive pa sa kanila. Okay? Yung concurrent naman is yung ang ibang korte pwede niya mag-take cognizance. Like for example, certiorari. Okay, yung special civil action under Rule 65. Yung certiorari, if it's in aid of appellate jurisdiction, pwede yan siya i-file sa Shari'ah District Court. Pwede rin siya i-file sa Court of Appeals. Pwede rin siya i-file sa Supreme Court. Okay? Yung certiorari. So concurrent, pwedeng sabay-sabay. Pero kapag na-file mo na siya dun sa isang kaso, sa isang court, dun na siya. Hindi mo na siya pwedeng mag-forum shopping ang labas na i-file mo sa ibang court. Okay? So that's the difference. In exclusive, dyan lang talaga na court mo pwedeng i-file. Yung concurrent, pwedeng sa iba rin. Okay? Concurrent. Kasi for example, yung Article 143, Item 2, may concurrent jurisdiction. But again, kasi appealed na ito dahil sa BOL. Sa BOL, effectively appeal dito for courts in BARM. Yun yung prevailing na idea, yung courts in BARM ang wala ng concurrent jurisdiction yung Shari'ah District Court. Exclusive lahat yung jurisdiction ng Shari'ah District Court. Inalis yung concurrent. But for outside, and in the old law, there is a concurrent jurisdiction like yung mga recovery of possession. If both parties court or pwedeng sa regular court, sa regional trial court. Concurrent yung kanilang jurisdiction. Next. Okay, yung forcible entry and unlawful detainer, nadaanan ko ito kanina, ejectment. Exclusive ito sa first level court. Sa municipal trial court lang kung nasaan ang property pwedeng i-file yung kaso. It's exclusive to them. In the next slide, we'll have the territorial jurisdiction. The court can only exercise jurisdiction in the territory. Okay, so the territory over which a court or particular branch or branches thereof may exercise jurisdiction. So under our dati kasi, Article 138 of PD 1083, as amended by, ngayon amended yan, yung new law defines the respective territorial jurisdiction of the SDC. So dati kasi, ang problema, for example, may limited kasi walang, for example, yung na-mention natin kanina na nasa Cavite, I believe in the first video, nasa Cavite or nasa Baguio, kailangan pa nilang pumunta ng ng Zamboanga City or ng Marawi City or ng Cotabato City kung ano yung convenience sa kanila. Kasi walang mga courts doon. And this is already field or resolved. Meron na solution dito kahit dahil bawat sulok na ngayon ng Pilipinas, meron ng court. Meron ng Shari'ah court. Meron ng naka-assign na Shari'ah court in all. Sa lahat. Kasi in the case of Awadi versus Asti, at that time, the Supreme Court said na dahil yung petitioner in that case at saka yung private respondent at saka yung mga anak nila they do not live within the Sharia court's jurisdiction. Sabi niya, wala daw jurisdiction kasi walang territorial jurisdiction yung courts na yun. That was a void. That's a gap na problem nung una. Kasi hindi lahat ng area sa Pilipinas ay may jurisdiction. But that's already a thing in the past because under present, meron na sa lahat. Okay, so Mutan Academic, when you will take the bar exam, wala kayong may encounter na gano'n na problem kasi meron na ngayong lahat na court. Okay? Next na tanong natin, kasi bakit natin pinag-uusapan ang jurisdiction at bakit ko sinabi kanina na in the past bar exam for the subject procedure, about a number of questions are on jurisdiction at nahirapan. Yun yung mga mahirap na tanong doon. Okay. So anong effect kapag walang jurisdiction? Next slide. Decisions or orders issued by courts outside their jurisdiction are void. Okay? Complaints or petitions filed before the wrong court or without acquiring jurisdiction over the parties may be dismissed. That's the effect. Yung decision, kapag wala palang jurisdiction ng court, void yun. Unenforceable na yun. Okay? And again, sabi natin kanina, it can be raised at any stage of the case, kahit sa appeal. Next slide. The case may be dismissed for lack of jurisdiction over the subject matter of the case by motion or at any stage of the proceedings or motu proprio. Motu proprio means yung mga hindi law students, ito yung own initiative ng court. Kapag nakita ng judge na wala pala siyang jurisdiction, kahit walang motion. Okay? Kasi dapat sana magpa-file ng motion yung defendant na ipapadismiss niya kasi walang jurisdiction. Or doon sa kanyang answer, ilalagay niya na walang jurisdiction. Okay. Pero kung si judge ang nakapansin, pwede rin yun, motu proprio. Because judgment, orders, and processes of the courts who did not acquire jurisdiction over the case are not binding. Okay. Kung hindi naka-acquire over the person, pagdating naman sa over the person of the defendant, wala. Hindi pwedeng utusan na judge yung defendant na hindi nga daw siya naka-receive ng summons. Because that's how you acquire jurisdiction over the person of the defendant. Next, this is the case of Villagracia versus 5th SDC. Tapos, dito kasi, one of the parties, yung final yung kaso, hindi niya sinabi na one of the parties is not a Muslim. Pero mag-asawa sila. So, ang understanding doon is Muslim sila. Pero lumabas when it was brought to the Supreme Court that one of the parties, sabi niya, hindi siya Muslim. So the Supreme Court said that this SDC, the 5th SDC, wala siyang jurisdiction over real actions kasi one of the parties is not a Muslim. And then we said in Article 143, sabi niya doon na ang Sharia District Court merong concurrent jurisdiction with regular court only if the parties involved are Muslims. Yun lang yung may jurisdiction. Okay? Kapag one of the parties is not a Muslim, next slide please, then dapat ang ginawa ng Sharia District Court, motu proprio dismiss the case. Ibig sabihin, hindi ka na maghihintay ng motion from the parties. Ikaw na mismo i-dismiss mo. Under Rule 9, Section 1 of the Rules of Court, if it appears that the court has no jurisdiction over the subject matter of the action based on the pleadings or the evidence on record, the court shall dismiss the claim. Next slide. Then here, the court said the 5th SDC had no authority under the law to decide Roldan's action because not all the parties involved in the action are Muslims. Thus, it had no jurisdiction over Roldan's action for recovery of possession. All its proceedings are void. All right. Now we move on to the jurisdiction of the Sharia courts in the Philippines, yung kanilang functional jurisdiction of the Sharia courts. So since this is an asynchronous activity and these are available online, so dadaanan ko lang sila. But your assignment is to go over this and then memorize this. These are important. Konti lang naman. Proceed. Next slide. For the Sharia High Court. Next slide. So, eto yung mga cases. Section 7 ng RA 11054, memorize nyo. Ito lang yung may jurisdiction ang Sharia High Court. Okay? Next slide. Okay. Sharia District Court naman. Okay. Next slide. Ito under sa PD 1083 at saka ito yung exclusive yung jurisdiction ng SDC sa first column, sa second column. Diyan, concurrent yung jurisdiction ng SDC with regular court. And then the last column yan yung appellate jurisdiction ng SDC. Okay. Next slide. Under PD 1083, ito yung original jurisdictions. Okay. Hanggang next slide, hanggang E. Please memorize this. And then next, item 2 would be the concurrent jurisdiction. Okay, so personal and real actions, okay, except forcible entry dahil MTC ang may jurisdiction yan, exclusive yan sa MTC. Special civil actions for interpleader, concurrent ang SDC at saka ng RTC. Okay, next. Okay, so may appellate jurisdiction ang SDC, Article 44. Okay. Now, let's move sa RA 11054. Ito na yung present na jurisdiction ng Sharia District Court. Lahat ng cases, exclusive original jurisdiction. Okay? Wala nang concurrent jurisdiction sa RA in the barn. Exclusive original jurisdiction. Anong ibig sabihin nito? Kasi exclusive sa kanila, wala nang jurisdiction ang regional trial court. Dati pwede pa mag-take cognizance ang RTC. Ngayon, wala na. Kapag both parties are Muslims, ang may jurisdiction lang is the Sharia District Court. Tapos, kapag pinagpatuloy pa rin ni RTC, sabi natin, wala na silang jurisdiction. Kahit sa appeal, pwedeng i-question yung decision ng regional trial court. Alright, so kaya ang Supreme Court, maraming activities na pinapagawa para ipaalam sa karamihan na meron na tayong nitong bago na nagbabago doon sa landscape ng pagfa-file ng kaso. Again, ang requirement dito, either or both are Muslims, pero kung may non-Muslim, dapat nag-submit siya sa jurisdiction ng court. Okay? Custody, guardianship, memorize all these cases. Kasi subject matter ito para alam nyo kung saan ifa-file yung kaso. Okay, next slide is the continuation. Okay, next. Yung naka-green, yan yung concurrent sana, pero inalis na. Yan, special civil actions for interpleader. Dati, ano yan siya? Concurrent. Pwedeng sa RTC may file. Hindi na. Next slide. Ito yung appellate jurisdiction in the next slide ng SDC. Appellate jurisdiction niya lang is yung decision ng Sharia Circuit Court. Next slide. Next. Ito naman yung Sharia Circuit Courts. Dadaanan lang natin ito. Asynchronous activities nyo, go read Article 155. Next slide. Ito naman yung sa bagong law. Okay, 11054. Nadagdagan, one of the additional, yung letter A, yung involving, okay, yung sa Tazir, I'm referring to Tazir. Next slide. Pareho lang yan sa old law. Okay, next slide. Yung naka-highlight, these are the new subject matter na meron ng jurisdiction ang Shari'ah Circuit Court. Example, yung ta'zir offenses. Okay? Meron ng jurisdiction ang Shari'ah Circuit Court. Pero wala pang law. So kapag meron ng batas na na-enact ang parliament, tapos ang penalty is hanggang arresto minor. Okay? Tapos all civil actions, ang assessed value, yung mga real actions, okay, if the assessed value does not exceed 400,000, kasi kapag more than 400,000, ang may jurisdiction is the Shari'ah District Court. Ang jurisdiction ng Shari'ah Circuit Court is hanggang 400,000. For real action, ibig sabihin ng real action, it involves title, possession ng real property. Real property is lupa, bahay. Okay. Pagdating naman sa personal action, yung utang, collection of money, rent, mga ganyan ng pinanggagalingan, kapag hindi umabot hanggang 200,000, ang jurisdiction is sa Shari'ah Circuit Court. Kapag more than that, yung demand doon sa complaint is more than 200,000, ang my jurisdiction, which is exclusive and original to SDC, is SDC. Okay? If both parties are Muslims. In the next slide, pinagdikit ko lang, kinumpare ko lang yung PD 1083 at saka yung 11054. Yung naka-highlight yan yung bago sa 11054. Next slide. Yan, so sa marami ang naka-highlight. Yan yung mga dagdag under sa BOL. Next. Now sa BARM, pwede ba ang Parliament mag-enact ng law pertaining to Sharia? The answer is yes. Under sa BOL ngayon, Section 4, Article 10, nilagay nila that the Parliament already has the power. Okay? Kaya ngayon, commercial and other civil actions not provided under PD 1083, pwede na. I've heard busy lang sila kasi merong mga urgent na priority bills na ginagawa nila. Inshallah, kapag nakapili tayo ng mga bagong parliament, piliin natin yung magaling kasi para mas strengthen pa natin yung Sharia. In our circle, yung may mga influence tayo, sabihin natin sa kanila, napakahalaga ng parliament, itong susunod na parliament kasi maraming kailangan tayong ipasa na batas. Ibinigay na sa atin, pwede na tayong maggawa ng mga laws of Sharia. This is ito na yung hinihingi, ito na yung ng mga nauna sa atin, and we're having it. And may we have parliamentarians, members of the parliament na alam nila, may alam about Sharia. Otherwise, paano nila maipapasa? Okay? Next. In the next slides, we have the inherent powers and means to carry jurisdiction. And this is Rule 135. Diyan nakalagay yung mga inherent powers of the court. Like, for example, nag-issue ng order si judge. So, kapag hindi sinunod ng police, anong gagawin niya? So, nandyan sa inherent powers ng court, pwede mag-compel ng obedience, pwede nang gamitin ang police force para i-request para yung mga orders ng judge ay ma-implement, or kahit man lang sa service pwedeng gawin ng judge. Kasi in exercise of its jurisdiction. Nasa Rule 135, Section 5 ito. Next slide. So please go and read this. Okay? Ano lang pinipresent sa inyo so that you can do more reading on your asynchronous, on your free time. So Section 5, Rule 135. For the means to carry jurisdiction, you'll read Section 6, Rule 135 also. Okay? So the court can use processes or modes proceedings para lang yung jurisdiction nila, yung mga orders, legal valid orders issued by the court will be enforced. And let's move to the doctrine of adherence to jurisdiction and residual jurisdiction. Okay, let's try na hanggang 1 hour lang itong video. So the doctrine of adherence to jurisdiction or continuity of jurisdiction, basically, kapag naka-acquire ang court ng jurisdiction, it will continue until matapos yung kaso. Tatapusin niya ni judge once an jurisdiction is attached. This is the case of Abad versus RTC Manila. Next. Oh, even if final na ang decision, the court can still ang nawala lang is hindi pwedeng i-amend or i-modify ng court yung kanyang judgment, pero meron siyang tinatawag natin na residual jurisdiction. Naka-enumerate yung mga pwede niyang gawin under sa Rule 39 and also on appeal. Okay? Sa next slide, in the case of DBP versus Carpio, nakalagay dyan yung mga residual jurisdiction of the court for purposes of the, like for example, approval of compromise agreements, issue protective orders para hindi naman masayang yung decision ng court. Okay. Next, about primary jurisdiction and exhaustion of administrative remedies. Next slide, yung primary jurisdiction, we have administrative agencies na merong technical know-how pagdating sa mga bagay na technical and within the jurisdiction of administrative tribunals sa kanila muna dadaan, ha? Okay, so hindi pwedeng magdiretso ng mag-file ng judicial case. You have to, and that's the doctrine of exhaustion of administrative remedies in the next case. That remedies requires that when there is an administrative remedy provided in the law, relief must be sought first. Exhaust that remedy first before there is a judicial intervention. Okay, so no recourse to court until all such remedies have been exhausted. So sa mga offices, for example, kung may protest pa na nakalagay, like I think this case is about the government procurement law. So kung may issue regarding sa procurement, there is a remedy na nakalagay under the law, may hanggang protest yun. So kapag merong remedy na nakalagay sa batas, you have to exhaust all those first before you go to court. Next slide, the case of Carale versus Abarintos. For your reading, please read the case also. Okay? Now, next, the error of jurisdiction and error of judgment. Quickly, next slide. Pag sinabi mong error of jurisdiction is that yung court nagkamali, nag-take ng jurisdiction, pero wala pala siyang jurisdiction. Okay? So it occurs when the court exercises a jurisdiction not conferred upon it by law, or when the court or tribunal, although with jurisdiction, acts in excess of its jurisdiction or with grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack of jurisdiction. Yung error of judgment is ito yung si judge na misappreciate niya yung evidence or mali yung pagkaka-interpret niya nung pagkaka-appreciate niya nung evidence. So errors of judgment lang yun. Hindi yun siya error of jurisdiction and errors of procedure or mistakes in the court's finding. Ang errors of jurisdiction, next slide, is correctable by certiorari. Yung sabi ko kanina, isi-certiorari mo under Rule 65. Pero kapag ang mali lang is error of judgment, you feel na nagkamali si judge sa kanyang decision, i-appeal mo siya. Ang remedy mo is appeal. Any judgment rendered without jurisdiction is total nullity and may be struck down at any time, even on appeal. The only exception is when the party raising the issue is barred by estoppel. Yung error of judgment naman are not proper subjects of special certiorari. Appeal lang talaga. Next, we move to jurisdiction versus venue. So jurisdiction, it builds, na-discuss na natin yung authority ng court. Yung venue, ito lang iano natin, the venue is basically, literally, the place where the case should be filed. Kung saan dapat i-file. Okay? Yung jurisdiction, we said, it's a substantive law. Yung jurisdiction over the subject matter is a substantive law. Yung over the person, over the issues, and the rest, that's procedural. So, venue is a matter of procedural law. Next slide. Now, if you have objection to jurisdiction, you cannot waive that one. It cannot even be stipulated to. At any stage of the proceeding, pwedeng i-object. Pero pagdating sa venue, it can be waived. It can be stipulated upon. Kapag hindi kinwestiyon yung venue, wala. Hindi katulad sa jurisdiction, that void yung decision. When a case is filed with the court which has no jurisdiction over the action, the court shall motu proprio dismiss the case kung walang jurisdiction. But when the venue of a civil action is improperly laid, hindi pwedeng i-dismiss ng court. Next, in the case of People versus Montilla, the court said venue simply refers to the physical or geographical location where the court proceedings will be held, while jurisdiction is abstract and refers to the power or authority of a court to hear and decide a case. So, next, how are we going to differentiate that one? So, for example, ang SDC, Shari'ah District Court, meron siyang jurisdiction, exclusive settlement of estate of a deceased Muslim. So, yun yung jurisdiction na tinatawag. Pero saan mo ifa-file yun? So that's an issue of venue. So under the law, the venue is SDC of the province of the decedent's residence at the time of his death, or kung saan meron siyang property. Okay? Next, quick notes on venue. Wrong venue is merely procedural, not a jurisdictional impediment. In civil cases, venue is jurisdictional. However, in criminal cases, is not rather in civil cases. In criminal cases, it is jurisdictional. Venue of correction of entries, petition is where the corresponding civil registry is located. Last note on venue, change of name is where the petitioner has resided for at least 3 years prior to the filing. Next, where is the venue for real? This will be the last topic now. Venue in personal and real actions. Ang real action, as I explained earlier, these are actions affecting title or possession of real property or interest therein. Any other action is a personal action. And to better understand, let's take example. Next, real action is an action affecting title to real property or for the recovery of possession. So example, recovery of possession. That's a case, right? Recovery of possession, that of a real property, or partition of a property, of a real property. That's a real action. Yung personal action naman is an action where the plaintiff seeks the recovery of personal property or yung mga enforcement of contract, yung specific performance, for example. Specific performance means meron kayong usapan, merong kontrata, tapos hindi, one of the parties did not comply with his obligations, so you file specific performance. And finally, this will be the last slide for this part. And in the next video, we will proceed with the special procedure in Sharia courts. For venue in real action, sa real action, it's where the real property or any part thereof. This is also the reason bakit importante, bakit kailangan na malaman mo yung nature ng action, whether or not real ba yan or personal. It's because importante mong malaman dahil kung saan mo ifa-file yung kaso. Okay, if it is a real action, then dapat kung nasaan yung real property or any part thereof, like for example, dalawang munisipyo ang nako-cover niya or dalawang provinces, then pwedeng kahit saan doon, where the real property. For personal action naman, iba kasi ang kung saan ka magfa-file. May choices, pero ang may wrong choice is the plaintiff. Pwede niyang piliin. Pwede doon kung saan siya nakatira, if it's a personal action, or kung saan nakatira yung defendant. Okay? So, at the election of the plaintiff. And that's the end of the part 2 of the video. In the next video, we will take up already the meat of the procedure. We'll do the Ijra'at al-Mahakim, inshallah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.